episode 6 of Happier Active. I'm Ellie. This is a great episode about breathwork, especially if it's something you're interested in but don't necessarily know loads about. There's some great little tips for getting started or some techniques you could try if it's something you found difficult in the past. And I think it's just a great chat in general. I had a bit of trouble with my internet halfway through, so I think I've mostly edited that out, but I'm learning a lot of new skills doing this, and this was my first really challenging edit. It was also one of the first ones I recorded, so I think now I know how to deal with that when it happens as it's happening. But I'm really enjoying how many new skills that I didn't know I was going to learn I'm learning by doing this. I am planning to start doing some little mini episodes, maybe once a fortnight, just on a Friday with any questions. So if you've got any questions, anything you want to know about, health, nutrition, mindfulness, anything like that, send me an email or a DM and I will answer them in that. And I really hope you enjoy this episode. It's absolutely great. Oh, one other thing that was this is absolutely classic me, real fine example of some pure ADHD. I asked Hieke how to pronounce her name right before we started recording and then immediately pronounced it wrong, even though I'd pronounced it correctly off mic before I checked how to pronounce it. So, thought I'd mention that before we go in. Absolutely classic in my head moment. But apart from that, I think it was a pretty good interview, so I hope you enjoy it.
So there are many ways to find your path to better health and happiness, and what works for each person is highly individualised. My philosophy is that most people are more likely to find that if they're active participants in their own journey. So this is a space to start exploring some of the rich and varied areas in which people practice, so you can start thinking about what resonates with you and discover new or different practices to either start or deepen your own health practices. And today I have Hieke, who's a breathwork and somatic practicer. So tell us about what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. I am super excited. My name is Hieke, and what do I do? Well, breathwork somatics, that kind of covers it. But what? It covers it, but it's also not at all. So I started doing this when I burned out, and then for a long time I thought that like my story was about overcoming burnout and like letting go of stress and all these things. But along the way, I actually realized that it's not about that. It was about finding and reclaiming my joy and really becoming an active participant, or I say a co-creator of my own life. Like, I am in control of my own reality. I get to create my own experience, and we actually have a lot more within our control than we tend to think. So I realized that my story was more about coming back into my joy, coming back into my aliveness, and like really allowing myself to fully marinate into this experience of life and to really take it all in and taste everything there is to taste, and even the things that might seem challenging or that might seem when I burned out, it seemed like, oh my God, how am I ever gonna get out of this? But even those things, they ended up shaping me in ways that I could not have imagined. So finding like the I don't want to say the good, because it's not like it's not a toxic positivity thing, but finding the aliveness in all of it and finding the expansion in all of it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, the toxic positivity thing is really tricky in this space, I think, because so I started doing breath work as part of trauma therapy, and so it's quite hard. It can be quite hard to talk about in that sense because it's completely changed my life for the better, but it obviously came out of stuff that was quite difficult, and so you can sound like you're talking about it in quite a kind of zealous way, and it doesn't change it doesn't completely negate bad things having happened, but it can change how your body reacts to it. And so that it's trying to find that line of how you talk about it is quite difficult sometimes.
yeah Yeah, and at the same time, like there's definitely toxic positivity in like the world and in like especially in this space, and a lot of like spiritual bypassing, and even breathwork can be used as a tool to kind of bypass your own experience and trying to like not feel the uncomfortable thing by immediately using a breathing pattern or another somatic tool to get yourself out of that uncomfortable feeling. But I think it's really about
Hmm.
expanding your capacity for the good and the bad, right? Like we don't want to live numbed out lives, and sometimes we have to feel these things really deeply, but that also means that on the other end we feel the joy deeper and we
Yeah.
feel the
Yeah.
good stuff more. And then to add to that, I also really feel like I am in general a very
Hmm.
happy, joyful, lighthearted person. I've always been that way. And for as long as I can remember, people have told me, you're too naive. No one's going to take you serious. You're laughing too much. Like almost like being happy and enjoying my life was a bad thing. So I was like, okay, I got to become like a grown up and be more serious and be like, I have an adult job now and I got to wear like the blazers and
Hmm.
whatever, and I wasn't happy at all. I felt miserable. And then, but as soon as that happened, and I had like I was working in sales, and it was very masculine, high pressure, like a lot of like I burned out
Yeah.
there. A lot of the more stressed you were, the better you were at your job. So being happy there was almost like that means you're not doing your job right. So I'm also kind of like, yeah, toxic positivity is definitely not a good thing, but we also
Yeah.
should not shame people for being happy. Like, why are we trying to fight people on joy? Like, let us be joyful, let us be alive. That doesn't mean that we're not finding anything challenging or that we're not dealing with uncomfortable things, that we're not scared of anything, but joy is supposed to be a good thing.
Yeah, it's such a tricky line, and it's one that I try and hold a lot of. Where you're, it's absolutely fine to talk about difficult things, and what I try and do is help people find, positive ways through it, but without dismissing the difficult feelings. But it's quite a difficult. It can be quite a difficult line, especially because, as you say, there's such a keen on both sides to either. So we get it a lot with new mums, where if they've had birth trauma, people will just immediately go, oh, but look at your baby, they're so cute, it's all worth it. And it totally dismisses how they might have felt about that difficult time. And of course, almost always they're very happy to have the baby, but it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that the day that the baby came wasn't really difficult for them. And they can still be happy. And then, so it's quite interesting. But then
Yeah,
also trying
exactly.
to help them not dwell in that and move forward positively, but without dismissing it is quite it can be like a narrow line.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Mm.
I really came to a point where I'm like, there's no good or bad. Like, there's no right or wrong. There's no
Yeah.
good or bad. I am not the sadness that I feel. I am not my emotions, but I'm also not the joy or the happiness.
Yeah.
And everything is passing, right? So I am just the one experiencing it, and I can experience deep, intense sadness, and I can experience deep, intense joy. And they both get to exist, sometimes in the same moment, and there's no right or wrong. It's just about allowing yourself to experience it, because collapsing into it and holding on to it or identifying with a feeling or with an emotion, that's that, yeah, that's where people end up in like feeling stuck or feeling like nothing is moving forward, because they identify to something that has nothing to do with their identity at all.
When you were saying about how you're generally like a positive
Yeah.
person, so then when you have things like the burnout happen, it can be really hard to separate that from who you sort of feel like you are inside. And so having these techniques or practices that help you connect back to that is, I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, it was. It was. Like I started doing breath work in my burnout actually. So before my burnout, I was
Hmm.
already in that job. I was like, you know what, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. Like I want to, I want to do something else. I want to help people. I've worked with coaches before. I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. So I at the time was following what's it
Hmm.
called? Yes Supply. And I did their like coaching certifications and was like NLP and hypnotherapy and EFT, and it was a lot on like mindset, subconscious mind work. And then I burned out. And at that moment, I was like, oh my God, this is so cool because now I get to try all these techniques that I've learned on myself. But then it didn't work. And I was like, well, what the hell? Like, I understand why this happened. I can, like, logically know that, if I do this and it's not going to happen again. But at the same time, when I saw the logo of the company that I worked for, I was having a panic attack, even though my mind was like, nothing is happening. What are you doing? They literally sent me a
Yeah.
Christmas card, and that sent me into a full-blown panic attack just from seeing the company name. And that's when I realized, like, wait, this is not in my mind, this is in my body, and I need to work with my body. And then I stumbled onto breath work, and well, that kind of started this whole thing. And then, of course, when because I was already planning on starting my business, I was like, well, I can't really call myself a mindset coach if I know that this has actually helped me more than the mindset work. So I did like the whole breathwork certification thing. I went down that path. And then I called myself a breathwork facilitator, and off we went.
Thing. It's so it suddenly everything
Yeah.
clicks when you're whatever it is for you that works, and then you can just go.
Yeah, exactly. It's wild. Like I remember the first experience I had with breathwork. I thought that I had reinvented the world. And it was just like a 15-minute experience. It wasn't like a long session or anything, but I came out of that session. I was like, I did not know that I could feel this good. I didn't know that I could feel like this. Everything became like clearer, and I was just looking outside, and I was actually camping at the time, so I was in nature, and I was looking outside, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so in awe of everything.
I had a question for you. People who struggle to even get, when they try and do, say, box breathing or that kind of longer out than in type breathing that I guess a lot of people recommend as a starting point. And they can't even do that because as soon as they start to relax, they almost have like a physical internal reaction to it, and they can't do it because they start concentrating on their breath too much and freaking out. For people like that, how do you recommend they kind of start getting into this sort of thing?
Yeah. I would actually recommend not starting with the box breathing or counting your breath or doing anything that requires you to be very like 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, like really like that, because then you just get in your head, and the whole point is kind of to get out of your head. I would recommend starting with a physiological sigh. I will explain the breath pattern, but I want to address as well why that is happening, because with the way that we're designed as human beings, with like our nervous system and our brains and like the whole shebang that is like controlling us from the inside, we want to be safe, right? So we're all wired for survival. We just want to survive. But to our nervous system, safety is more about familiarity than it is about things that are actually safe. So if someone has been in a stressful situation for a very long time, maybe since they were growing up, if they grew up in a chaotic environment, for example, and their nervous system is kind of wired that they see stress as safety, the moment you start to relax, your body is like, ooh, danger, danger. We don't know this. So we gotta come back into like that stress position, like you mentioned before as well. Like when you see them kind of like tense up, and their shoulders go up, and their breathing goes up. So knowing that is what's happening, I think, is also very important for those people who actually want to work towards that point of being able to relax more. And then just being very gentle with it. And then the physiological sigh is a beautiful breathing pattern. And it's called the physiological sigh. It's a self-soothing breathing pattern. So your body is literally designed to use this. And you see it in children a lot. When children are upset and they're crying a lot, when they start to calm down, they always start to go kind of like, this is always my least charming moment, but they kind of start to go like right. So the physiological sigh
Mm-hmm.
basically is 2 inhales and 1 exhale through the nose if you want to calm yourself down. So you would just go like breathing in through the nose twice and then just relaxing in the exhale. So not like actively blowing out the air, but just letting the exhale fall out of your body. You don't have to count anything. You don't have to like keep track of how many breaths you're doing. Just do that for a while, and it's a self-soothing breathing pattern. So your body is designed to kind of recognize that pattern and use that as a calming sensation in the body. But it always is. Like if you look at
Mm-hmm.
children, it's adults who create a story around it, right? Like a child gets it is into the supermarket with their mom and wants to buy like all the candy, and the mom is like no, and the child doesn't know how to deal with rejection yet, but it does know that it needs to be discharged from the body. So the child might go like lie down kicking and screaming, and the mom is like, oh my god, I'm so ashamed, I'm like, no, we can't do that here, like trying to pick up the child and everything. But all the child is doing is releasing that emotion from the body. Like
Yeah.
it's not a bad thing. And when you see adults who do not know how to release emotions because we were not taught how to do it, and since we were young, people have told us don't cry, don't do this, don't yell, be quiet, like, so no one ever told us that it's actually healthy to do these things in like a safe environment, obviously. And as an adult, maybe we wouldn't choose the supermarket floor for it, but it's still a healthy way to release some energy from your body. And children know
Yeah.
because they're not in their head yet. They're
Yeah.
very in their body. Yeah. I just wanted to add one more thing for the physiological side for the people who really love um understanding with what's happening when we tell someone to breathe deeply in order to get them to calm down. Sometimes it doesn't work because you can feel like you're breathing deeply while taking all the breath still up into like the higher part of your chest, and the higher part of your chest
Mm-hmm.
in your lungs is related to the fight or flight response. So then if you think you're breathing deeply but you're still breathing up in your chest, you're reaffirming to your body that there is danger. And with the physiological sigh, when you're not thinking about how deep you're breathing but you're taking one inhale and then another one, you're pushing the air down more, and the lower part of your lungs is associated with the parasympathetic part of the nervous system, which signals for safety and relaxation. So that is why like your body knows how to do these things, and children know. We forgot. But like remembering that and then knowing how to utilize it, it's the greatest joy of my life.
I struggle with sitting still a lot. And so I've been trying to
Yeah.
do more meditation, but it's very hard for me. But something that I found really helpful, which I think might be more somatic, but I don't know loads about that. So I'm going to ask you about that next. But I found that if I stand up and I like hold myself like I'm hugging myself and then like sway while I'm doing the breathing, it like keeps me in my body.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not like, whereas if I try and do the like more traditional sit still and do it, immediately I'm like daydreaming, not concentrate, it just all goes.
I love that you mentioned this because when I came out of my breathwork facilitation certification, whatever you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
what I was taught was the lie down and breathe, basically, like sit still and breathe, lie down and breathe, don't move. And then I started like developing my own practice, and I just like my body just had the urge to move, and
Mm-hmm.
I've always been a natural mover in like in my life. So as a kid, I was like always upside down and hanging off things. I
Mm-hmm.
was in ballet, gymnastics, dance, like whatever. I was always moving my body. So I started exploring that like with the breath and really allowing myself, instead of like being like, oh my God, I'm breathing, so I should be like lying here like a corpse. What would happen if I start swaying a little bit, or if I move my hips a little bit, or my legs, and just kind of tuning into how your body wants to move? Because our bodies are so incredibly smart, like there's so much wisdom. We don't have to think about what to do, but we can just
Mm-hmm.
tune into our body and let our body do the work for us.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, and it probably is again the kind of people who almost need this stuff the most, but the pressure to do it right can almost make you stressed about doing relaxing work correctly. And it's like almost a, like yoga is one of those ones where I think you see it a lot where people feel really stressed about going to class because they're worried that other people are going to be better at it than them or doing it more right than them, and you see this kind of what's supposed to be like an enjoyable relaxing movement for some people becomes this like big source of stress because they're trying to do it correctly rather than thinking about what's it doing for me and how is it making me feel good.
Yeah, and how does it feel for me? And I think that like
Mm-hmm.
with those people, I think it's also because I used to be a perfectionist, so I used to want to do things right. I went to yoga classes. I
Mm-hmm.
hated it, so I started doing yoga online because then no one would see me, right? So I didn't have to worry about am I
Yeah.
doing it right because I'm in my own room. Guess what? My rules. But one thing that I really worked on with my like with myself and with my mentors as well was the
Mm-hmm.
overcoming that like perfectionism and wanting to do things right, because every time when we
Yeah.
do that we also like put our power outside of us, right? Because we give our power to someone else's opinion of me. So really working on who I am and who I want to be and how I want to live my life and how I want to express myself, that has been a journey, but that's so important. And I think starting to do that and just becoming more connected with who you truly are and building trust in yourself, building up your self-worth, or at least how you experience your self-worth, because
Mm-hmm.
your self-worth is always there but sometimes we don't feel it, and really connecting back to that is helping so much with not giving a shit what other people think. But yeah, you're right, sometimes wanting to do something relaxing becomes then very stressful.
I think it took me a long time to separate what I wanted for myself than what other people wanted for me or that I thought that people expected me to do. And that probably was like my 20s of trying to figure out like, and I don't think I even, a lot of it, if you'd asked me, I wouldn't have known what I was doing that was actually for myself and what was for other people.
No.
And I wasn't even aware that a lot of what I was doing was probably contributing to not feeling great because it wasn't really for me, and I was like in an internal conflict that I didn't even notice was there.
Yeah. What was the moment where you started to
So
realize
yeah,
that?
probably similar. I'm a very naturally positive, optimistic person, and I was becoming more and more like negative, and like not in a. So there was some like aspects of depression, but it wasn't like it was. I just was so feeling so negative all the time, and that was like quite an uncomfortable feeling for me because it's not how I naturally am. And again, that kind of burnout started to creep in because I was waking up every day not wanting to get up, not wanting to do stuff. And I couldn't really put my finger on why because I actually did quite like my job, but I hadn't recognized what it was doing because it was helping other people, but in a way that I wasn't looking after myself at all. So I was putting everything before myself. So I guess if I ever sat down to think
Hmm.
about it, I'd be like, oh, well, I'm doing this great job and I'm helping people, which is what I want. But I wasn't doing it in a way that actually served me or protected me. And I didn't know how to have like good boundaries. Like now I'm much more able to say, actually, I haven't had enough sleep today, or I've had a really rough morning, so I can give way less, and I need to go for a walk first, or I need to do something for myself before I can be good to do what I need to do. And just even having that awareness means then when I get to work, it's from a
Hmm.
much more positive place, and I know what of me I have to give and what I need to protect.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love that. And I love that you kind of pointed out that I think that that is very important distinguishment for a lot of people, and I relate to that as well. Is the point where you're like, when I think about this logically,
Mm-hmm.
I have no reason to feel bad. Like when I hit that point of burnout, my career was doing well. I owned a house. Like on paper, everything looked great, but I felt so shitty. I felt so miserable. And that moment where you're like, wait, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like I have all the reason to be happy, but I don't feel happy. Like what the hell happened? That moment, it's eye-opening.
But then I was like, I don't know how to explain it to other people, so I kind of carried on in that for quite a long time because I didn't have the next step, which is that what we were talking about before of like, it doesn't matter what other people think. Like, I need to be happy, so I need to just do these things for myself. And so I went back to college, but I quit my job. I went and lived in the mountains for 6 months and had like a bar job, and it was really fun. And I guess everyone else there doing the same thing was either like 18 or like 21, and I was 29.
Yeah, but who cares? Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Like it's honestly wild when I talk to like a lot of my clients, but when I talk to people in general, and I used to feel like this as well. I was thinking when I was in my corporate job, when I was in my 20s, I was thinking how do people do this until they retire? Like I cannot wait to retire because then I can finally do something for me. Because now I am just following what I'm supposed to be doing, right? I went to college, I graduated, I got a job, I got a promotion, and I was like doing the grind work and like, oh, I was following all the steps and I didn't love it. And I also realized that I was kind of waiting, right? So I was like waiting until I could live my life, almost like passing a test at being a grown up, and you have to do all these things, and then when you check all the boxes, then you get to make your own decisions. Like looking back on it, it's wild, but I was just following what I thought I had to do in hopes that at one point things would magically change and I would get to actually do the things that I wanted to do.
Yeah, and the other thing I see is those people who do actually enjoy those kind of jobs, but they are quite high stress, and helping them find ways to reduce that stress, even because I think some people like the environment. You know, if you're really extroverted, you like those kind of busy, like sales environments that are like pretty full on, but finding a way to still be your authentic self in those environments can also be quite interesting. Like you were saying about not being able to show your kind of joy because they want you to be very serious, and so that it can be, the disconnect can be there rather than like being able to show up as your authentic self even if you like the job can be quite hard.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah, for sure. Like when I was working there, I was doing I at some point eased into breath work, but I've always been interested in like spiritual practices, or I would use like incense or whatever, and I was doing yoga occasionally. But if I would mention that at work that I did yoga, all these guys, they would just laugh at me and they were like, oh my god, you're so woo woo, that's so out of here.
What's funny though,
and now I'm like, you should see me now.
Yeah. I also wonder, because how long ago was that?
It's about, I would say, I'm trying to think what year we're living in.
So I wonder, because I reckon some of those places now probably offer yoga classes, and like, because people are all these companies are getting more aware that actually this stuff is quite helpful, and sort of, I see like corporations now like offering a lot of these stuff now.
I hope they do. Yeah, I think that's great. Like, it should be. Well, you can't really make it mandatory, but at least I do believe that companies should offer these things to their employees because it's so important, even for the company itself, right? Because a company is healthy as long as the people that are working for the company are healthy. So if the company is making the people sick, the company has to do something there. The company has to offer, I don't know, give them tools for dealing with stress or setting boundaries, yoga or like active, activities.
No.
But I haven't been in the corporate world in a while, but I do hear from people who work in corporate that some companies are picking up on that.
Have like a real culture that almost, unless you're stressed and on the edge of burnout, that you're not working hard enough, and that's quite a hard culture to break, because even if you don't actually feel it, you almost have to perform that you're feeling it to prove that you're doing your job. So that's quite complicated. I
Yeah.
think like in the city that happens a lot in finance and things. And
Right?
like,
Yeah. Yeah, I used to work in a company like that.
mm-hmm.
You can go like online and do like a burnout test. If you Google like am I burnout or whatever, you get like a questionnaire and you fill it in and then you get like a score. I remember that a few months before I actually like broke down and burned out, me and my coworkers were doing these tests, and for all like each and every single
Yeah.
one of them, they were like deep in the red. Mine as well, deep in red, like 90%. Go see a doctor, please. This is not healthy. And what did we do? We high-fived and we laughed
Yeah.
about it, and we were like, "Oh, cool, we must be doing something right." It's like it's a badge of honor to feel miserable and be stressed all the time.
I used to work in for a sales company as well, and there was this guy, and he used to come in late every day, at sort of 5 to 9, and I guess a lot of people got in much earlier than that, with the newspaper tucked under his arm, and he was so relaxed, and he'd like stroll in, and then he'd be on the phone doing his deals all day, and then he'd leave at like 4:30. Anyway, the owner of the company did not like it, and they got rid of him. And it basically, they hadn't, I guess they weren't looking at their numbers probably, but he was basically doing like 50% of the business of all of the sales team. And, actually what he was doing was going early to a cafe, reading the paper, so when he called his clients, he would know what was happening in their bit of the world. But I guess they just thought, because of his relaxed demeanor, that he was bad at his job. And it took them like a lot. I think they ended up having 3 people to
Yeah.
do the same job that he was doing, and that was quite an interesting early on like thing that went off in my head of like sometimes what we
I love that.
think people want, or what people want, performing what people want can be as important. That was probably one of those like negative things that got stuck in my head of like, oh god, you have to show that you're doing this and this all the time, or other people will miss, what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But the thing is that when you do that, like your brain and your whole
Mm-hmm.
body, they don't really know the difference between what's real and what's not. So if you then show up to work and pretend to
Yeah.
be miserable, you're gonna end up feeling miserable. People like how companies approach work and their employees, and it's insane. Like I do believe that if you're happy and if you take care of yourself and just show up for yourself in the ways that you want to, right? If you do the things that you enjoy, you're gonna do your job 10 times better than when you're anxious and stressed out and constantly worrying, like, oh my God, what if my boss, like we would be sitting there as coworkers, just like working, and sometimes we would be chatting, and then we could hear a door open and we knew it was the boss, and everyone would be like, like busy, 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 but we're just pretending to be busy when the boss walks in because we're scared of what's going to happen. It's so weird actually that the
Yeah.
world is like that has become so normal, because when you talk to people about this, everyone recognizes it. Maybe
Yeah.
there's some people who have not done corporate and they're like, I don't know that, but I hear it from so many people, and I mean, I'm glad that I'm seeing it changing. Definitely starting in like smaller companies, some bigger companies as well. Maybe a lot of people also making the choice to go out and do
Yeah.
something for themselves. And I think like the world is gonna be better
I think
for
it's
it.
like clients that I have when they first come, like the amount that they don't know or understand about their own bodies and how they work. And so a lot of the beginning bit is often, teaching people things that, sort of seem on the surface like quite basic, but actually it's because we don't know all that stuff. And it's a bit like what we were talking about with the physiological side, where as children we knew these things instinctively, and because we've not like formalized that knowledge.
No one teaches you in school how to regulate yourself, how to use your breathing, how to listen to your body's needs. No one even teaches you to set boundaries. Like if we're not even talking about breath work or somatics, like no one teaches you how to set boundaries. It's insane.
I actually find often I get more worried about saying something that I think will upset someone, and then actually you have the conversation and they're not that upset because a good friend or a good person in your life wants to know if they're upsetting you by mistake, or they want to know if they're doing something that's making you stress out or upset, and they want to correct that. And if they don't react like that, they don't love me, or what if they don't? And so you take all this stress about trying to accommodate someone else, and then often when you actually have that conversation, they'll be like, oh, I was only doing it because I thought you liked it. Or I was only kept suggesting we go to this place because I thought you liked it. Be all about like what we've been thinking.
Yeah, so we put so much pressure on ourselves to do the right thing for others that we forget to do the right thing for ourselves. And like I deeply trust that the right people, they love you. They don't care if you like they want you, at least I want the people that I'm close with to be able to share things with me and to express themselves. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the time we get so caught up in then what do they think and what do they do. I actually have a story
Mm-hmm.
about this. It's not entirely relatable, but it popped in my head, and it's kind of a fun, not really fun, but it's kind of a fun story. But I have this ex-boyfriend, right, like years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and he was not like, he was a walking red flag, but I got it into my head that he was cheating on me. I was convinced of it. I had no physical proof, but I just knew that he was cheating with his ex. And I would ask him about it, and he would get so defensive and so mad. And he always like warped the conversation to that I was obsessive and that I was wrong and that I didn't trust him, and that, I always ended up feeling bad about myself. But then at the same time, I had this gut feeling like something is not right. Something is not right. And I couldn't point my finger at it, and I was just feeling bad until I saw. So in the Netherlands, we had this social media platform. It's called, actually it's called Hives, but I don't think that that's really a good thing in English. Maybe that's why it doesn't exist anymore. But this was like before Facebook came. We had a social media platform. I'm not even gonna repeat it. Um, and I was just doing my thing, doing a little bit of like research and detective work there.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that she had posted on her social media platform a picture at his parents' house. So, and we were young, we were living at our parents, so I knew that she was there with him, obviously. And I confronted him with it. And then his reasoning was that he didn't tell me because he didn't want to make me mad. And I was like, well, I am mad now. And he's like, yeah, exactly. That's why I didn't tell you. I'm like, I'm not even mad about the cheating. I'm mad that you lied to me, that you didn't tell me when I asked you about it, and that you made me feel bad about myself and made me feel bad about my intuition. And I felt like I couldn't trust myself, that I couldn't trust my body.
Mm-hmm.
And he just couldn't get it in his head that the whole reason that I was so mad, for him, that was like, see, I was right in not telling you because now you're mad.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, if you told me earlier, I wouldn't have been mad. We would have broken up for sure, but I would have been like, yeah, that's an asshole move. Bye bye. But the fact
Yeah.
that he just flipped it on me and made me feel bad about myself and then lied to my face, oh my God, I was so mad about it.
Yeah, and I think people don't like having uncomfortable conversations today, so they avoid them, and then they get in those kind of situations. Then they actually get worse when you have to have them. But we're not very well prepped.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't know how to deal with uncomfortable emotions, so they avoid the conversation because no
Yeah.
one taught them how to properly be uncomfortable, basically. Like getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. We say that about growth, but it also goes for these types of conversations. Yeah.
We plan to have that conversation so that we can both go into it calmly, and like by not just suddenly one of us going, oh, I need to talk about this thing, and then it escalates. Actually, like, okay, we're not going to talk about this now because we've got to put the baby to bed, we've got to do all this stuff, but after dinner we're going to sit down, maybe with a glass of wine, but we've like prepared for it, so we're going into it both knowing that it might be an uncomfortable conversation and getting in the right frame of mind for it before, and then you can have that conversation and it almost never turns into an argument because you're physiologically prepared to have a difficult conversation, so you don't go into fight or flight. You can stay calm.
That is so powerful. because when you're in fight or flight, you lose the ability to empathize with others. So when you're in fight or flight, you're getting kind of almost like tunnel vision, and you create a lot of friction because you're both, when two people are in fight or flight, they're not attuned to each other. They can't, and they don't have that social bonding situation. When you're in like parasympathetic nervous system state, so when you're calmer, when you're grounded, you actually have the ability to see things from different points of view. So it's easier to emphasize with what your partner is saying. You can express yourself clearer because you can kind of come at it from like a bigger perspective as well. And that's why it's like, I love that. I think everyone should not have the conversation in the heat of the moment, but like take some time for yourself, get grounded, work through, like, it's not about forcing yourself to be calm, but also allowing yourself space to feel the uncomfortable emotion and to express that in, like, I don't know, maybe you want to punch a pillow, or maybe you want to like cry. And then when you're like, I don't want to say released, when the emotional cycle is like completed, coming back into a grounded space, and then having that conversation or that talk.
You know, like, I mean, we have a toddler, so there's a lot of bickering. But it's being able to say, like, actually, we're not going to do anything productive now. We talk about it, but when we come to it, it's not about being like, oh, nothing bad happened. You know, it's like, okay, yeah, I definitely didn't handle that right, or I got sorry for snapping at you, but this is why I got upset. Like, and that is really helpful. But we started doing that because in the beginning, when we were both really tired, we were arguing a lot because we'd both just immediately go 0 to 10 because we were so tired.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a structure for talking about those things because we never really argued.
Yeah, but that's like, it's really important to create that for yourself. Like me, I'm in a long distance relationship. We live together in, like, we see each other in countries. Sometimes we live somewhere for a longer period of time, and we're now working on visa stuff. But people process things differently, right? So some people want to just, like, I am someone who wants to talk it out, like immediately talk it out. My partner is not like that. He needs time to process, and then often it's easier for him to text than to actually talk about it. So when we were living together in Mumbai, when we had an argument, I would be like, okay, I'll go in the bedroom. Let's take some time apart. I would deal with my own emotions there because my need to immediately talk it out also highlights an insecurity in, oh my God, I got to make this right?
Yeah.
Or I'm going to lose someone. So I was working on my own stuff there, and he was processing in his own way. And then we started texting, like in the same house, in different rooms, we were texting. That opened the conversation, and we could talk about it. We could come to a place of connection again, and we could like end the conversation in the same room. But having like that kind of strategy where, you know, like, oh, this is my initial response and this is yours, and how can we find a way that we both get space to do what we need to do while still remaining some form of communication and connection. It's very, very powerful, and every couple should have that.
Really hard to not feel like someone else's different communication style is a personal attack. Like, if you are the kind of person who needs to fix things immediately, the other person needing space to go and calm down can feel really upsetting. And very...
Yeah, because again, that safety familiarity thing. But it's so cool to learn about these things, and then to, like, of course, implement it and start like making decisions and then doing these things in your life, and just seeing the difference that it makes, and also seeing that nothing bad is happening actually, right? Yeah. So I started setting boundaries. Nothing bad happened. I started doing things that I really enjoyed. The world didn't end. Like,
yeah, for me, learning how to say no to things I didn't want to do was like absolutely transformative, and it was something I really struggled with. And like, initially, I'll tell you how I used to start practicing it, which is such a small thing, but I used to get so stressed. I'd be like, oh, I'll order something in a restaurant and ask for one change, and even doing that I would feel like, oh my God, like so tense and so stressed, and just be like, oh, can I have that without the whatever tomato? I would be like building it up into this huge thing, and then it would be fine. And then slowly I started to feel more comfortable to say to not total strangers, actually, I don't want to do that today.
Yeah.
And it's that's something I'm still working on a lot, because I have a real tendency to just say yes to everything and then be absolutely exhausted, or kind of still have these little mini burnouts.
Yeah, but that's a great strategy, and that's exactly how you expand your capacity, right? You
Yeah.
do the things that feel uncomfortable, but you don't like do the most uncomfortable thing right away. You start kind of like building it up slowly, where your comfort zone expands, and that's how you make a change, basically.
Yeah.
Transformation
And
101.
teaching your body that it's safe to do it without
Yeah.
panicking. And I think so, something that I see a lot, and I think that doing that physiological sigh again as that little start is so part of this. Of so many times I see people try and change way too much at once, and so they're kind of setting themselves up to fail, and then they're almost teaching themselves that there's no point in trying, but it's because they've tried to start, to use a running analogy, they've tried to start by running a marathon before they've
Yeah.
can even do 5 minutes of continual running. And then,
Exactly. Like a complete life overhaul, and then
yeah, and then it reinforces that thing of like, I'm not the kind of person. Yeah.
and you'll be like, it's January 1st. I'm going to go to the gym 5 times a week. I'm only going to eat healthy. I'm going to go to bed at 10. I'm going to get up at 7. And I'm going to drink enough water. And I'm going to read a book a week. And you're like, your system, like your whole body is like, what the hell is happening? And then you start self-sabotaging.
Yeah, and then you're like, I'm not the kind
I
of person who
failed.
can do this, so I'm just not going to bother.
Yeah, exactly. It's fun being human, honestly.
So,
Yeah, but
if people wanted to start breathwork and they've never done it before, and not necessarily the people who are so stressed they can't do it, but just kind of someone who's read a lot about it or seen loads, because I know there's loads about it on the kind of internet, what's a good place for people to start like incorporating it as like a daily thing?
that really like that depends on someone's personal like preferences as well. So and depends on someone's situation. Obviously, reach out to me. Obviously,
Of course.
but you can start like. So there would be two moments, 3 moments that I usually like talk to clients about as well. Like if you want to start incorporating a routine, just see where you need it most. Whether that's first thing in the morning, if you need a little bit like more energy to get started, if you already have, for example, a morning routine. I don't have a morning routine, or not a fixed one at least, but let's say you have a meditation practice. That's a beautiful way to add in some breath work. Maybe you're someone who wants to sleep better, then I would say find like a different style of breath work and start creating a ritual in the evening that will help you sleep better. Or if you're someone who has a very high demanding job and you do presentations, for example, often, or you have a lot of important meetings and you feel a little bit nervous about that, then that would be a moment to see if you can create a little breathwork ritual before that. Because if you know, like, what is the moment in my day where I would get the most benefit out of it, if you start your routine there, you're most likely to stick with it because you see the results immediately. And then you're going to want more and more and more and more. And that's how you kind of fall in love with breathwork and end up like me. But like it goes for it goes for anything though. If you want to change something in your life, find the moment where it creates the most impact, because the sooner, like, we want to see results, right? No one wants to slug away at something for months at a time without a result. So if you identify a moment where you're like, this is really going to make a change and this is going to make an impact in my life almost immediately, start with that.
Yeah.
And then go on from there. And I have breathwork resources for all these moments in the day. So if you want to, like, where do I start? Then yeah, I can definitely point you in the right direction.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great advice, I think. And I think that's something that, that's again where a lot of people not go wrong, but have like not been successful when they've tried things, because it's identifying the biggest wins first. If you can, like, quick big wins first, and then you get that neural feedback that it's going well, and so then you're more likely to, it's like an upward spiral, isn't it?
Exactly, because you're like, oh, this is great. I can do this, and then it's just a compound effect as well because you're going to
Mhm.
do more of it and you're going to get more results because of it. So you're going to keep doing it. And also not be hard on yourself and don't tell yourself, I'm going to do breath work every day. Because especially if you're just starting, like the moments I now identified, you can get really great results. But if you want to do like the deeper work and really work with like doubts or fears or insecurities in the body and really get to that, you don't have to do breath work every day. You can start with even doing it like once a week or twice a week and allow yourself to get used to that as well, because it's a whole new experience to be connected to your body and to feel things, right? If you're
Yeah,
used to avoiding feelings, then allowing yourself to feel something is a big step. So do it once a week.
yeah, and giving yourself time to process how that felt,
Yeah,
and maybe even
and
like
get
write some
support
of
with
that
that.
down to like
Yeah.
think about why it was so uncomfortable or difficult, and then wait till you've kind of got that set in your mind before you have the next go.
Yeah. And get support with that, especially
Hmm.
if you want to do the deeper work. Like don't you can do box breathing on your own, that's fine. But again, I wouldn't recommend starting there. But if you want to do the deeper work,
No.
definitely get support from someone who can guide you through it and make sure that you're not like overloading yourself.
Where can people find you if they want to reach out and find out more?
On Instagram for sure. Also, I'm on Threads, which is where we connected.
It
I've been
was.
loving that little area on the internet.
Hmm.
So Instagram, Threads, most social media. I think you're gonna link it in the show notes.
Yeah.
And all my on the social medias that I'm on, my handle is always I am Hieke.
Yeah.
And then you can just send me a message there.
Yeah, I think your social media is great. It's really like the Instagram stuff you've done is really helpful for that sort of beginning of figuring out what breathwork is. So if people are interested, I really recommend they go and look at it.
Thank you. I recommend it as well.
Thank you so much. This has been really great.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I loved it.